What if I told you that a major world religion underwent a kind of silent reformation? A total shift in its core beliefs that happened so quietly, most of its members never even saw it coming. Today, we're digging into a story of theological change inside the Seventh-day Adventist Church, a change that some say was not only predicted, but carefully planned and carried out.
Get this. Just a few months before she passed away in 1915, one of the church's most important founders, Ellen White, dropped this bombshell. It's a final, chilling warning that really sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about. It really makes you wonder, what exactly were these great changes she saw on the horizon?
All right, so let's meet the main player in this story. In the years after Ellen White's death, a new and very influential figure rises up through the ranks, Roy Froom. He was a writer and editor, a big deal in the church administration, and he would become the architect of these changes. But the big question we have to ask is, was he a reformer or was he a revisionist?
Okay, so the claims against Froom are pretty intense. The charge is that he essentially falsified the history of what the pioneers believed, that he pushed a totally new theology about God, that he actually manipulated inspired writings to make them fit his new doctrines, and even went so far as to get rid of historical evidence that contradicted his new narrative. I mean, this is some heavy stuff we're about to dive into.
So how did all this happen? Well, the best place to start is with Froom's own project, creating what was known as a new order of books. This is where the new theology really started to take shape, where the seeds were planted.
And listen to this is straight from Froom himself. In the late 1920s, he was asked to write a book on the Holy Spirit. He says he looked through the vast library of writings from the church's pioneers and concluded there was basically nothing there. Practically nothing. Now, you have to understand, that's a wild claim. These pioneers wrote volumes on the subject, so for him to say the well was dry, that should be a huge red flag for anyone.
So what does he do? If he can't find what he wants inside the faith, he decides to go outside. He literally says he was compelled to go find books by theologians from completely different denominations to get his initial clues and suggestions. Think about that for a second. He's importing ideas from other belief systems to redefine his own faith from the inside out.
And you can bet this did not go over well. Not at all. Froom himself admitted he got pummeled by the old-timers. You know, the people who were actually there from the beginning or who knew the pioneers personally. They knew what the church had always taught, and they saw this new stuff Froom was pushing as a complete departure from their original faith.
So what do you do when the founders are still around and calling you out? Well, the strategy, and this is pretty shocking, was basically to just wait. Froom says he was told by the General Conference president at the time to hold off, to wait until the people who knew the original truth had, and I'm quoting here, dropped out of action. In other words, until they died. Only then could they really push this new theology forward.
Now, this plan wasn't just about adding new books to the library. No, it was also about actively erasing the old ones. It was a full-on campaign to tear down the theological landmarks of the past. You can see it unfold pretty clearly right here on this timeline. 1915, Ellen White dies. Boom. By 1928, Froom's new book is out there. Then they start revising classic pioneer books like the commentary on Daniel and Revelation. And it all builds up to 1957 with this book, Questions on Doctrine, which was basically designed to show the wider evangelical world, hey, look, we're just like you now. And Froom was not shy about this. He said, flat out, that the whole point of these revisions was to get rid of what he called erroneous views in the churches on literature. Just think about that language. He is calling the faith of the church's founding generation an error that he needs to correct. And it's not just us looking back and saying this. Even a well-respected Adventist historian, George Knight, came to this conclusion. He said Froom wasn't an impartial historian. He was a guy with an agenda, someone who was willing to manipulate data to get the theological result he wanted. This is a really key part of the whole puzzle. You see, the early church never had a rigid, formal creed. They had fundamental principles, which was basically, here's what we generally believe. It was never a test. But that got swapped out for fundamental beliefs, which became a hard and fast creed, used as a baptismal vow. You had to sign on the dotted line. It's the exact thing the pioneers had always warned against. So how do you sell a change this massive? Simple. You reframe the past. Froom started calling the original non-Trinitarian view of the pioneers, which, by the way, was the majority view for decades,
the erroneous concepts of a minority. See what he did there? He took the foundational belief of the entire movement and painted it as some fringe idea held by a few confused people. It's a classic spin tactic.
And here it is, the finish line, the culmination of all this work. In that 1957 book, Questions on Doctrine, the Church officially announced to the world, "We are one with our fellow Christians." The goal of being accepted by the wider evangelical world, a goal Fromm had worked toward for so long, had been achieved.
Okay, so after seeing all that history, all that change, the question isn't just about what happened back then. The question is, what do you do with this information now? It becomes a personal challenge. Check this out. Another pioneer, J.N. Loughborough, laid out this 5-step roadmap to apostasy way back in 1861. Get a creed, make it a test of fellowship, try members by that creed, denounce dissenters as heretics, and then persecution begins. I mean, read those steps and think about the history we just walked through. It's uncanny, isn't it?
And this just brings everything full circle, right back to where we started. Years before her death, Ellen White didn't just give some vague warning. She was incredibly specific. She predicted that the very fundamental principles that built the church for its first 50 years would one day be officially labeled as error. And that is exactly what we've seen happen.
So you see, this whole thing stops being just a history lesson and becomes something really personal. If the very foundations of a faith could be dug up and replaced so systematically, what does that mean for what you believe today?
Look, we've laid out the evidence, and a lot of it came from the main players' own mouths. So now you're at a crossroads. Do you just take the word of modern theologians and accept the faith as it is today? Or do you decide to become a detective yourself, to go back to the Bible, back to the original writings of the pioneers, and discover for yourself what the truth really is? The church's history has been written, but the choice to reclaim its original foundation, well, that's entirely up to you.